It's the Free Thought Project Radio. I'm Bob Tuskin. We'll start today's show off with some recordings of me trying to get some answers from the NYPD. I called on several occasions asking some simple questions about the Eric Garner murder and about whether or not he had filed a report against the police right before he was killed. I'll also talk with Sean Ras on Ras Rado for about a half hour. Warning, this conversation was very passionate and very graphic for adults only, but I think we hit the nail on the head with our commentary. I can't wait for you to hear this. It's important stuff. It's the Free Thought Project Radio.
Reach the 120th precinct of the New York City Police Department. If you have an emergency,
please hold while I try that extension.
What's your precinct, Officer Patron?
Yes, sir. I know you're busy, and I don't mind holding, but I just want to make sure I'm holding for a reason. Is there...
Did you want the guy you spoke to before, correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You said you wanted to speak to the detective that you spoke with before, correct?
Yeah. Is he available, or...
He's not at the moment. That's why you're on hold.
Okay. Do you have a time frame, or should I leave a number if it's going to be longer than 10 minutes?
You can leave a number.
So you don't have a time frame?
Negative.
What was his name?
I'm not sure exactly who you spoke with. That's why I'm trying to contact who it was. So just leave a callback number. I'll have him contact you.
That was the last call I made the other day to the NYPD to try to find some information about the Eric Garner case. It's amazing how the mainstream media can have the full compliance of the press at times, but when an alternative media outlet such as the Free Thought Project calls with a basic question, we clearly got the runaround. The first few calls, that officer had answered. He told me he was going to put me on hold and find the right person to speak with, and as soon as he put me on hold, moments later, conveniently, somehow, I don't know, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, the phone was disconnected. I called back a third time. I spoke with another officer who said he was going to look into it for me. He seemed much more helpful. He told me he was going to put me on hold. Once again, I guess they had a problem with their phone system that day. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's not. But he hung up on me. So I called back about 15 minutes later and got that original officer that I had spoken to who you just heard. Well, when I asked him about who he was going to give my information to, after he had put me on hold for several minutes, he clearly got caught in a lie because he couldn't answer the question. And I think that was the most shocking and I guess damning part of the whole task of calling the NYPD. Asking, again, for a simple answer to a simple question. Whether or not Eric Garner did indeed file complaint against that NYPD precinct before his murder. That's all I wanted to know. It's amazing the runaround the bureaucracy known as the NYPD will give the press, especially the alternative media like the Free Thought Project. Anyways, let's now get to an interview that I did that you absolutely have to hear. This was with Sean Ras of Ras Rado, and we spent a good half an hour talking about all of the corruption, all of the madness, and all of the ideas behind this police state. I was very blunt, I was very candid. There's adult language, there's adult conversation, there's some graphic stories that we refer to of police corruption and police abuse, and I think you'll enjoy it. I have no doubt in my mind that the police state, the militarization of the police,
right,
and the reports that come out on a continuous basis of badge abuse, of police brutality, of corruption in our government that goes all the way down and trickles down into our police forces on a local level. I have no doubt in my mind, Sean, that that is the number one issue we face here domestically. Whether it's the NSA spying on us, whether it's the CIA torturing people, whether it's your local sheriff's office stealing money, continuing to fight the war on drugs, preventing good people from having access to medicine for their loved ones who are sick. In no way, shape, or form is that not a crazy, fucked up Orwellian nightmare that we shouldn't all be outraged about and taking to the streets and revolting.
We're actually seeing. I know we refer to this. We've been referring to this for years, but we're literally almost to 1984, the novel. I mean, we're on the doorsteps of it, and people need to see that and realize that. How can you not?
And it's not just 1984. It's a hybrid between 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World.
I've never read that. I need to read that.
Well, and you'll see that, and there's a great meme that's going around the web about whether or not we're looking more like out of a page of George Orwell's 1984 or out of a page from Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And the truth is, it really is a hybrid. George Orwell told you what to think. Or I should more aptly say, Big Brother in George Orwell's 1984 told you what to think.
Right.
And what Aldous Huxley wrote about was telling you not to think.
Gotcha.
And that's the fundamental difference between the two theories. Not only are we being told what to think, but perhaps an even more potent form of propaganda is telling us not to think. Going into that alpha state in our minds where we just want to sit back and ignore reality. We want to be an ostrich with our heads in the sand. That apathetic lack of caring is by far one of the most dangerous weapons that the powers that shouldn't be have used against us, the general public. And then before you know it, it's like that frog in the boiling pot of water, Sean. If you put the frog in when the water's lukewarm, the frog's not going to mind. And before the frog knows, the water's boiling and the frog is dead. Now, if you were to put that frog in that boiling water right away, it'd jump right out.
Right, you'd fight to get out. You know, it's like what David Icke said. I don't know if you're a fan of him or not. I followed him for a while. But you can't get off your knees with your head buried in the sand. You know, you'll never get off your knees then. And that's part of the problem. I really think we're seeing I say this all the time, and I've been saying it for years. I think we're seeing more of an awakening, but it's really flowing hard. You know, my co-hosts aren't here tonight. It's just me. I'm running solo. Dave is up in Tampa at the going away party for Ledge there. And he was walking through the streets of Tampa, and he posted a video of protesters for the Michael Brown. I had it pulled up here. I wanted to play it. It's only like 25 seconds, but it's going on everywhere, and we're seeing it. It's right. It's an hour and a half for me, but it's there, and people are doing it. And I think that's a big deal that we're seeing it now.
It is a big deal, but my concern is that these release valves are put into place to allow enough pressure to get out, and then at the end of the day, nothing's ever coming from these actions.
What do you think? What do you think of the? Have you seen the photos? Obviously, I'm sure you've seen the photos of the cop pointing the gun, the agent provocateurs that were in that crowd over in Berkeley and in that region there. There's been talk of a video. Have you seen any video yet of that?
I don't know that I've seen video. I've definitely seen the pictures, and we've been publishing them at thefreethoughtproject.com. Which, by the way, Sean, just a quick announcement as an aside, I'm now hosting the Free Thought Project Radio once a week, twice a week. In fact, I'm going to use this very clip. Those listening to us right now are also listening to us on the Free Thought Project Radio podcast for this week.
Oh, okay.
And we are covering all of these police state actions. We're covering very closely all of the protests. We have live streams up at the website. We have people on the ground holding these protests accountable because, as you know, we have seen a very clear history of agent provocateurs continuing to create more of an issue than was there to begin with. In other words, we have peaceful protesters demanding action, demanding accountability, and these peaceful protests are being set up for failure. They're being set up to have people arrested, to have people scared, because that's a big part of it.
And people think you're crazy when you talk about this, and this goes back. People don't realize. I mean, this goes way, way back. But the U.S. government really got heavy in this in the '60s with the whole uprising, the Black movement, the Black Panthers, and they did a lot of agent provocatoring. They did a lot of COINTELPRO. They infiltrated these groups in order to try to produce a negative response from the people within the group. And we see it all the time. This is not new strategies. The G20, it was done in Pittsburgh. It's been done in Canada. It's been done all over the place. So when we talk about this, I caught flack this week. We're talking about all these agent provocateurs. They're undercover cops. Well, guess what? They're not there protesting in a positive light of what the protesters are protesting. They're there to either A, rile them up and get them into trouble, or B, collect data and information and what's the word I'm looking for here, Bob? Intelligence. Thank you. Yes, exactly. And people think you're crazy for saying that. So we see it happening, Bob.
We do see it happening, and we've been able to document this. And it's not even out of our mouths solely anymore. This is also declassified in several government documents that will show you that this indeed is happening. We see entrapment from the FBI on a regular basis. It's not quite the same, but there is a history of entrapment. We see police forces entrapping mentally challenged teenagers to sell them a little bit of weed in a high school and then ruining the child's life because of this absolutely absurd desire to make us, the useless eaters, the criminals, all out to be, bad guys. And sometimes they're so desperate, it seems. And this is very clear in the aforementioned case of this mentally challenged kid who was, set up for selling a little bit of weed after he was pressured and pressured and pressured and pressured. This isn't something that we're making up, folks. This is a tactic that is in place, that is being used on a regular basis in investigations, in stings, and in protest. And the protests are being absolutely 100% fueled by other interests than just the organic people that are out there saying, hey, we need accountability for this action or that action.
Well, that happens all the time, too, Bob. We saw, even Occupy, we saw that in the same thing. It started out with a good idea, and then all of a sudden these people were in there trying to make money and trying to organize and make things go somewhere. And to back up what you're saying about the boy with the drugs, let's look at the 21, 22 fake terror attacks that have been foiled by the U.S. government, that were all orchestrated by FBI informants and agents.
Yes, the underwear bomber, the Christmas tree bomber, all of these.
Times Square bomber.
Times Square, all of these had similar patterns. And by all means, this was entrapment with these cases. These were cases of entrapment. So we see this same MO being used again and again by the authorities. And the question is, why? Why do they have to use these sorts of tactics if they have a legitimate threat that they should be dealing with? And they do. So it's kind of bewildering to ask yourself, why are these agencies continuing to use these tactics? And all we can do is hold them accountable. And that's what we're doing with the Free Thought Project. I'm really excited to be a part of their team now, because you'll find no other site, and I'm not just saying this because I'm working with them. I was a huge fan before I got on board. No other site is really holding these public servants or supposed public servants, because I'm losing faith in that, but nobody's holding them accountable, and we need to.
Out of the 25 or 30 tabs I have open up on my computer right now, I would say 80% of them are from the Free Thought Project.
Wow.
So I mirror their articles a lot. So that's one of my main resources between them, PNAC, Photography is Not a Crime out of Miami.
Sure.
and of course, Cop Block. When it comes to this, those are my three main sources I go to. So yeah, they do a great job over there. And like I said, I mirror a lot of their stories on Ras. So
awesome. Well, let me get your reaction on this story that I just wrote about for them. You can find this at thefreethoughtproject.com. Former officer sentenced for gruesomely stabbing and shooting his family's dog. Smotherman was the guy's last name. He shot his dog Whiskey 3 times with a .45 caliber gun and slashed its throat with an 8-inch knife at his home in far west unincorporated Bexar County. That's in the San Antonio area. And he did this because, according to his son, he was upset that the dog was digging holes in the back. And as the authorities entered the scene, the dog was still wagging his tail after he had been already shot 3 times and stabbed several times.
It's sickening, Bob, and we see these kinds of things all the time. All right, we see these cops going into the wrong houses and shooting dogs in the backyard, in the house, around the house. There's the one video of the one dog that had gotten free, and the cops had caught it. And it was outside somewhere. They were in front of their vehicles, and he just pulled out his gun and shot it while it was already, lassoed. It's like, really, you see this shit, and it is very disturbing. I'm a cat owner, not a dog owner. But I love dogs. Dogs love me. It's just something about me. I don't get it. When people can do things like that, I mean, go to young children. You can judge how a person's going to turn out a lot of times by if they're the guy with the magnifying glass burning the ants, or if they're the guy with the cat playing in the yard. You know what I mean?
It takes a special kind of fucked up character to want to shoot a dog and so on and so forth. And we've deemed it puppycide at the Free Thought Project because there's case after case after case of this sort of thing happening. And, part of me says, well, this isn't nearly as important as the abuse to human beings, as the abuse to children. But then another part of me almost empathizes and is even more disturbed with it being an animal, because animals are so vulnerable. They're supposed to be protected,
Well, the good thing about it, Bob, here's what I look at with it. When we talk about the police shooting dogs like they have been, or any kind of animal, it grabs the attention of more people when it's a dog or an animal than when it's a human being. And that's a disturbing fact, actually, if you really think about that.
But there's something behind that psychology. And I was having this conversation with a friend of mine today. For better or for worse, it seems that we are more empathetic towards what's happening to an animal. Again, I think it has to do with the fact that they're vulnerable, that they can't protect themselves in any way, shape, or form. A lot like how we feel about children.
Right. Which are getting shot too now. I mean, 12-year-old boy, shot down by a cop because I'm not a cop, but I can tell you don't just pull up to somebody who you get a call for possibly having a gun. You don't just pull up right next to them. You stop down the road, you work your way up slowly, you barricade yourself a little bit, and
right. Well, it's this Captain America vigilante, rah. Let me go shoot this motherfucking kid with a gun in his hand, rather than choose our battles wisely and be a peace officer and, like you said, follow a protocol that makes sense. It is common freaking sense at the end of the day, and that sort of common sense is completely being removed from the minds of law enforcement and so many others in the bureaucracy known as government. So, Sean, at the end of the day, I think it's up for us to say, hey, no, we're not going to take this. We're going to do something about it, and we're going to hold you accountable.
Do you look at this as do you look at this as a race issue, or do you look at this as another issue? Because a lot of people are pushing the race issue, and I try to find the stories that aren't, where they're white on white, cop white, person being injured or assaulted white, which you can find a lot of those out there. So where do you stand? You stand, I'm guessing, I know you pretty well.
Yeah, I really don't think it's a race issue. Surprise, surprise. However, there is, by all means, a larger number of minorities, if you will. I hate to use that term, but per capita being put in jail and prisons and being harassed by the police. That's not to say it's because of race, though. So I studied philosophy.
Right.
And it's a logical fallacy to say that because there's a higher number per capita of these individuals being messed with, that it's necessarily the case that it's because of racial discrimination. Do you see that?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
There's a leap there. The two correlate, not necessarily because of one being the predicate for the other.
Okay.
And basically what that comes down to is there are other factors involved with the reasons why we see a higher number per capita of blacks and Hispanics and so on and so forth. And it has to do with economics. It has to do with a whole slew of other factors. And those other factors are the reason why we see more people in prison, again, per capita than, whites, for instance. Now, that being said, the same sort of tactics, the same sort of divide and conquer, the same sort of outlook as you're a potential perp and you're a citizen, therefore I am different than you and we are against you. This mentality of them being against the general public and the general public at any given moment being a threat to them that could potentially put them in harm's way and so on and so forth, that right there is the true bias that officers are experiencing that trumps, for the most part, and this, of course, is a generalization and should not be applied to every officer in every context, in every situation. But for the most part, that attitude trumps racial discrimination. It's the thought that, hey, you are potentially
guilty and proven
to
over an innocent.
The exact opposite of what our justice system was founded on is that everybody out there is a potential criminal and is a potential threat. And if you look at things that way, if you look at it through that lens, after a while, you're going to start to draw out these negative encounters from the public. And that's not because of the fact that the public is really a threat necessarily. That's because you are creating a self-fulfilling prophecy with your mindset, and that's being taught to our police officers on a regular basis in the police academies across the country. And a big part of that is because of the militarization influence on things. The idea that, and you served in the military, you know this very well, the idea that there are potential threats everywhere. When you're in combat, everywhere is a threat. This war mentality, and the war on drugs has helped to facilitate that for the most part.
And now the war on terror is added to it.
The war on terror now also perpetuates that notion, and that right there is the militarization of the police, this idea that you're in a Vietnam here domestically. You are constantly domestically at war, and who are you at war with? This all begs the question, who are you at war with? Exactly. It's you and I, Sean. It's
Why do you think
I.
Fusion centers, we get these fusion centers in all the major cities, where the feds are in there working right alongside with the cops, training the cops. It's a big problem especially when the feds start to get involved with our local governance. I've got some cop friends or some people I interact with on Twitter who are local cops here. And did you see the story? I'm pretty sure Free Thought had it. The story about the guy that got pulled. They were on their way to the hospital. They were speeding. They got pulled over. They kept on the side of the road for 10, 15 minutes by the time the ambulance and everything got there. The guy ended up dying of asthma.
Asthma attack.
Because he was 2 miles from the hospital, and the cop didn't use discretion and didn't say, okay, take your time and go, or hey, I'll follow you, or hey, get in my car, I'll drive you. He made him sit there 2 miles.
Well, Sean, he was following his protocol. Don't you understand? He was following the law. The law, Sean.
Here's where I was going with that. All right, this one cop I know, we got into a little debate. He's a Sarasota County cop. We got into a little debate about that situation. I said, well, watch the video. Tell me what you would have done. He said, listen, I've gotten in trouble for using discretion before. I didn't arrest an 81-year-old lady. I didn't ask why or whatever the story was, but he said, I got in trouble for that, for not arresting her, when he said he used discretion. Now, my question, Bob, and this is a hard question. This is a very hard question because we have that thin blue line. Are there any good cops in your mind? Now, I've already expressed my thoughts on this. What are your thoughts? Are there any good cops?
Okay, so there are good people, and that's, in my mind, very clear that there are good people. But these good people, the second they put on that badge, are potentially malevolent. And that right there, it transcends them as an individual because they're no longer an individual. They're an order follower. Okay? And at which point do these order followers say, you know what? No, I'm going to be a good individual. I'm going to do what in my mind makes sense, what is ethical, moral, and so on and so forth. And we look at the Nuremberg trial, and I hate to use this
Just
Nazi.
Following my order, sir.
Yeah, I hate to use the Nazi example here because it's so cliche, but it really is interesting to look at the mindset of some of these low-level Nazis. And, I come from a Jewish family, so by no means am I anti-Semitic here. But let me just point out that a lot of these Nazis, and it's such a demonized word, the Nazis, and by all means, there was horrific war crimes that took place during World War II on the hands of both sides of the equation. But these Nazis, Sean, were fathers, were brothers. They wanted to
human beings.
They wanted to take their kids for a birthday dinner. They wanted to make love to their wives at the end of the night, if they were lucky. I mean, the point is, I hate to do this, but I do want to humanize these individuals. I want to humanize them for the sake of showing that they're dehumanized the second they put on that uniform and the second they started following orders. They are no longer humans because they have been dehumanized by that platform, by that position that they are now in.
I would agree with you so much on that line because you do. I mean, I know cops, and I know they're really good people. But I think, Bob, part of the problem we're seeing is the good cops that are out there that do stand up end up getting in trouble, getting harassed. The female cop from Miami that stopped that dude that was on his way to his second job. She was a state trooper or a highway patrol here in Florida, and she stopped the Miami cop that was going to his second job in his patrol car.
Right.
And she arrested him on the side of the road. And she actually got death threats. She got harassed. She got driven out of her district, and she had to go to a different district.
I remember the story clearly.
Yeah, so we see that kind of stuff. And I'm going to play something here, and it's actually from the Free Thought Project. Imagine that. Like I said, most of the tabs here are from there. But this one here, I think, is a good example. When I retweeted this, I just put, hey, cops aren't safe from cops either. I think that should give you an idea what this story is.
Get back.
This video is of an NYPD officer assaulting a fellow officer. The man in the green pants is first grade detective Harold Thomas.
He throws me to the ground head first, and they commence to roughing me up, to beat me up. My son and everybody else that's around there is yelling, he's a cop. What are you doing? He's a cop.
He's a cop!
Thomas is describing an incident that happened 2 years ago. After partying here at La Marina nightclub in Washington Heights with his son and friends, the detective says the night took a terrible turn. When he walked back to his SUV, a Cadillac Escalade, 2 uniformed cops approached him and said, Thomas's car fit the description of a shots fired call. The detective tells us he quickly identified himself.
I could never just show one without the other, if I show somebody the shield, we want to see the ID card, So I showed them both, and I said, I'm Detective Howard. Harold Thomas from JTTF. That's who I am.
The 28-year veteran detective had an official police plaque in the window of his SUV, his shield, and his service weapon. So at that point, Thomas thought showing his ID would be enough. But he says it was far from enough and far from over when a third uniformed officer showed up.
The third cop comes up, and he's a John Wayne. He spins me around, slams my head on the hood of my car, which actually made a dent in the hood of my brand new car. He grabs me by the seat of my pants, throw me to the ground head first.
With Detective Thomas down on the ground in handcuffs, hurt, his own adrenaline running high, and according to Thomas, the more officers that arrived to the scene, the more things got out of control. And when a lieutenant arrived,
I says, "Luke, can I talk to you?" You know, I'm expecting him to take control of the situation, and he just, took it to another level. He starts very unprofessional. He starts cursing me, "You're a disgrace," blah, blah, blah. And he takes his hand and he hits me in the face and he mushes me, almost knocks me down.
You hear them say, "Hey, he's one of us." How did you feel at that point?
First I'm dazed because I was almost knocked unconscious, but I'm in disbelief. But then I regain my senses and I'm saying to myself, these guys are in trouble.
the story took some twists and turns and led to charges against Thomas that include DWI, resisting arrest, and assaulting a police officer. But those charges were immediately dismissed. The case lagged out for at least a year and led to an...
I get a big laugh out of that, Bob, because it's a police officer assaulting a police officer. Kind of makes you laugh a little bit.
It
internal
shows
investigation.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, it just goes to show you that, you know, when that uniform's taken off, it really doesn't matter. But I tell you what, they'll protect their own, and sometimes to absurdity. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. The amount of
hubris.
Yeah, and the amount of apology, the absurd apology that they'll go to try to justify the actions of a fellow officer is absolutely crazy. I mean, justification to absurdity is what happens with the police trying to protect the police. It's like they can do no wrong.
Well, that's why people start ranting about these grand juries. They made the decision. You need to accept that. But how many times have we seen autopsy results being fudged or changed because they were ordered to, or we see information being either held back, changed, or given too much of? You know, there is reason to question a lot of these things.
And I want to go back to the story you were just playing because it's absolutely startling. But, you know, we heard this case of this 16-year-old boy being pinned down by two other officers in North Carolina.
Shoved in the mouth, that one?
I'm not sure if that's the one. Well, this boy, here's the, I mean, there's so many of these. It's hard to confuse him. But this 16-year-old boy, he weighed like 90 pounds. Both officers were pinning him to the ground. He was mentally challenged. And another officer came in, reportedly said he didn't have time for it, and shot the kid dead. Shot the kid dead. And
I do remember that one. Yeah, I do.
And I did some work on this on my show, calling the police departments, holding them accountable. And I had a police officer, I'll never forget this, call my show and justify the actions of the officer that shot this kid dead. In fact, I should look that up and include that in one of my future podcasts for the Free Thought Project. I really should, because it just goes to show you how absurd, how far they will go to apologize for their fellow officers. Again, removing all humanity and just looking at it under the guise of the entity of the fact that they are gods. Literally, they think of themselves as gods.
Bob, before I spin this into another subject, can you stick around after the next break? Like, do you have a schedule or you got some time?
I got some time, and by the way, again, I'm including this for my show, so I'm killing two birds with one stone here because I think this is an important conversation to have, and I know my listeners will benefit from this just as much as the listeners hearing it live on your show tonight are.
I want to stay on the police topic then, and then when we come back in the next hour, I want to touch on some other things. And so continue on. I just want to make sure we had time because I don't want to just stay on one thing with just you. So I want to hit other stuff.
Sure, and I got a lot of stuff going on that I'm researching, but this is the focus of the Free Thought Project, and rightfully so, because it is so immense and it's so important that we have to continue to hit the pavement hard, just like they're hitting our brothers and sisters heads down on the pavement hard. I hate to make that pun there, but that's I mean, there was a story a couple weeks ago.
The guy that he asked the cop to move to make way for him to get through, and the cop and him ended up in a tussle, and he fucking smashed his head on the ground.
Next thing you know, his head's hitting the pavement hard. Yep.
Foot on top of the head, smashed down. I mean, come on. Really? All right, so they got into a little verbal argument, but that's not a reason to beat somebody down. I mean, honestly, if you and I met in a bar or on the street and we got into a verbal argument and one of us laid hand on the other one of us would be going to jail.
Sure.
There's
Absolutely.
no question to that.
Maybe they should teach the officers this adage that, you might have heard it before. I think my parents told it to me as a kid. It goes like this. Sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can never hurt you.
Yep.
If somebody's saying, you stupid pig, you piece of shit pig, you smell bad, you have a small penis, sorry to be so crude here, folks, but if you don't have a sense of humor, perhaps you shouldn't be listening. Whatever it might be that they say, and I'm not saying any of this, but if you can't take that, if that causes you to put your hands on somebody else, then you got a problem. You got something that you missed.
But Bob, you were disrespecting that police officer.
And
you weren't complying with his orders, Bob.
Well, if the order is righteous, then that's one thing. But if your ego's hurt and therefore you're going to use your authority to beat up on someone, then we got a problem. By
far. Now let's talk about accountability, because you brought that up earlier. And I think part of the biggest problem we're seeing right now is we're not seeing the proper accountability. Let's go back in time. We got Kelly Thomas. I always get his name messed up when I say it. Beat down and killed by cops, no charges, or nothing ever came of that. You have the gentleman that was handcuffed, laying on his stomach with like 5 cops on him, where the cop pulled his gun and shot him in the back and killed him on the train platform. There was really the guy got 3 years and ended up getting out in less than a year, or some BS like that. I mean, I'm not 100%, the numbers are a little messed up. So we're working on this accountability issue is part of what's causing this, I think. Now, killedbypolice.com just recently started up. And I talked about this earlier in the first hour. And I think it's an important thing because, again, it gives you everything, and it doesn't say, hey, everything here is wrong, because there are some justified shootings on that list of people killed. But when we're talking about 1,000 people, and we're getting the argument back from the other side that, a cop dies every 58 hours. Well, yeah, a cop dies every 58 hours, but only 27% of that, only 27 of the 75, I think is the number, are from attacks or from violence. The others are from accidents or natural causes. That's an issue that isn't addressed enough, because I've got an article here that's from some cop supporting organization. You may have saw it going around on the Facebooks, talking about that number. And if you actually go do the research at the FBI stats, you see that's very skewed. So how do we justify the number of people killed by cops with the number of cops killed each year? You see where I'm going there?
Yeah, and that's a good question. We know that more people die on the other side of the coin. More people die from being killed by the police, and this has been given a term that I'd like to bring up at some point, and I think is important. But more people die by being shot from police than they do from terrorism, than they do from a plethora of other things that are seemingly more of a threat to us, and that's just the facts, and of course that shapes it in a certain light, and that sheds a certain light on it. But it's very telling to hear those statistics and to see just how many more people die from police at the hands of police officers. Now, police being killed, like you said, those numbers are skewed, and by no means do I think that we should not be sensitive to those stories.
I think any human being. So I'm very into human being. I don't care where you're from. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your religion is. If you've got blood running through your body and you stand on two legs, then you're a human being. And you might be the evilest person around. I still don't want you to die. That's not my goal, to see you die. People get killed doing evil things, and it happens. And I get that. Yep. But I don't want to see people dying.
And I don't either, but the fact is, you know, at some point, if somebody is violating natural law, if there is a need to protect yourself, if your life is genuinely in harm's way,
there's a time to kill.
There is a time to kill. And there's a great article by Larkin Rose, who will be speaking at the Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia, called When It's Okay to Kill a Cop, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I might have seen that article, or was it Cantwell that did an article very similar to that? I don't remember if it was Larkin's one or if it was Cantwell I'm thinking of.
Larkin's went pretty viral, and a lot of people misconstrued it as being about cop killing. You know, about this willy-nilly vigilante-type cop killing spree. And that's not at all what it was about. If you read the article for more than 2 seconds, you would know this. And it was tried to, you know, they tried to villainize it as being...
Well, let's not forget, Bob, it's been ruled in multiple states. As a matter of fact, somebody just got cleared that there is a time to kill, and there is a time that it's okay to kill a police officer. You know, unfortunately, and that's a sad thing, but if I'm sleeping in my bed and you're going to do a no-knock raid on my house, and I don't know it's you, and I shoot you and kill you, then, hey, it's the way it goes down. It's not my fault. I was in my house being peaceful, you know, and a lot of times you hear this, and they're even at the wrong houses, you know, so I don't know. It's one of those things. We got a couple minutes here. Let's talk about dangerous jobs, because that's another argument that's thrown at the cop haters that we are all the time. You know, it's such a dangerous job to do, but it's not even in the top 10. I don't know if you've researched this or not, or seen this information out there, but logging is more dangerous. Fishing is more dangerous. You know, it's not even in the top 10. So what's your thought on that?
Isn't that funny? You know, that's kind of the mantra, too. It's a dangerous job, and we have to show respect to the Leos. They go out there and put themselves in harm's way and on a regular basis. And you know what? It's becoming more of a dangerous job because of this continuous, complete, and utter dropping of the ball on the hands of the police on a regular basis. The general public, in other words, the general public is becoming more and more abrupt and confrontational with the police. But
they've drawn it out of us, though.
They've drawn it out, absolutely, and they've created this hostility towards them through their actions. And again, we're talking in general terms here, but the average person, you know, it's ridiculous. You know, they're so on edge, and this is what they're taught as a part of this idea that we're all potential threats and we're all potential, you know, combat.
Everybody has a gun in their pocket.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's got a gun in their pocket. Everybody's going to kill you. I mean, it's that crazy. So, no, it's not the most dangerous job. Yeah, no, most people are not ready to shoot a cop in the face when they're pulled over for a speeding ticket. That's just not the case. You know how many hundreds of thousands of people are pulled over each week? And
each day?
Each day. Yeah, you know, my numbers might be
really,
off.
if you do it nationwide, I'll bet you 100,000 people are pulled over easily each day in this country.
Each day, sure. And you know what? We don't hear about 100,000 deaths. We don't hear about 1,000 deaths each day.
Right. If it was so bad, you would think that there would be a lot more. If you think about the civilian law enforcement interaction every day, you think that there would be a lot more deaths and a lot more violent actions happening. But I don't think that's what we're seeing. Listen, Bob, we're going to take a break here. I appreciate that you're going to be able to stick around with us for a little bit. We're going to roll here into the third hour. I want to get into let's do some chemtrail talk, Bob, all right? Let's start with some chemtrail talk. I think that'll be a good thing to talk about. And some global warming issues. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, good. We'll be back in a little bit. You guys are listening to the First 52 on RasRadioLive.com. We got Bob Tuskin from the Free Thought Project. We're going to get serious here. Stand by.
Well, that does it for this edition of the Free Thought Project. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our channel.